All right, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and start, and then by the time it's 5:05, Henry, it'll probably be time for you to put on your presentation.
Sure.
So welcome. Thank you all so much for participating in this. It's been a long stretch of time since we've been able to be together, since we had the webinar in Smith County. And this is our next awesome event. So as you all know, I'll just give a little background. Texas Hemp Harvesters Association was founded on 3 basic principles. Our first is to educate everybody about legal hemp in Texas. The second is to develop responsible supply chains. And the third is to really help create the industrial market. And so as part of that last principle, we have partnered with certain associations around the United States that are also moving forward in that effort. We feel like, you know, the more hands that are joined together, the faster and farther we'll run. So we have partnered with US Hemp Building Association, or joined their association, and have a very close relationship. And so US Hemp Building Association will do the presentation tonight, but it's all focused around educating everybody in Texas and whoever is interested what's happening here and what we have, what's available to us in the rest of the United States. So it's going to be an excellent opportunity to find out more about what's happening in construction with the hemp, also how we can get more involved. So part of what we would love for you to do is participate. I want this to be kind of interactive. So I will be the moderator. I'll be checking the Q&A and the chats. And if you have any questions, or, you know, send them out. We're going to have a question and answer at the end. We'll have US Hemp Building Association start with their initial presentation, and then we have 2 other experts in the hemp construction field that will talk a little bit about their specialties. So very excited again that you've joined us. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. If there is one thing I could say from an association standpoint we hope comes out of today, we hope that connections are made and we can start building a real supply chain for construction products using hemp in Texas. So that's our want. Hopefully everybody shares that want and we can all get together and create that. So without further ado, Henry, would you mind showing the agenda so we can show everybody what we've got going?
Sure can.
Thank you.
Get this going real quick for us.
Wonderful. So thank you again. This is all about hemp building materials, what they're like, and what we can do in Texas. So click me down to the agenda. There we go. So first, we'll have Justin and Henry talk about the US Hemp Building Association. I'll give a short intro to them in a second. They are going to talk about Hempcrete and hemp lime construction. Oftentimes that's what people know about hemp in construction, even though there's a lot of other applications. So we're going to start there, make sure everybody has the same foundation, and then we'll move on to the different hemp building materials companies that we have on board as panelists also. They will spend some time giving an explanation of what they do and what products that they offer and their background in the industry. And again, we're going to have Q&A, so you guys can pepper them with questions, and let's use this time to start figuring out how we can work together and, you know, increase this market here in Texas. And without further ado, I would love to hand it over to our partners in all things positive hemp related in the construction industry, and that's Justin Johnson and Henry Vallis. They represent US Hemp Building Association. They are responsible for the Texas regional group, so that's all of us. So I will turn it over to them, and thank you again for participating, and thank you, gentlemen, and all the panelists for being here to share your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself first, Justin, and I'll follow, my friend.
Yeah, so as Hannah said, my name is Justin Johnson. Very excited to see y'all, well, not see everyone, but at least be able to talk to y'all this evening about the US Hemp Building Association and a little bit about what our mission is, what our goals are, and a little bit about the material itself. So my background, I was born in Dallas and then went to school out in Colorado. That was when I first started to dip my toe into the hemp industry. Started seeing a lot of that business start to grow out there and start to see where the momentum was going, especially on the industrial side. So started meeting some people and getting involved, and found a couple builders who were starting to get into Hempcrete out in Colorado. and since then wanted to develop my knowledge in that space. And now I am CEO of PackDeck, which is we're a software that builds supply chain infrastructure around the hemp space. So, our main goal is really, with this organization as well, is just to move this industry forward and show what hemp can be used for and in the industrial side.
Awesome. My name's Henry Valles. I've actually been working in the real estate industry for over 10 years now. Got my start in construction, mostly new construction, helping developers and builders market and sell their condominium townhome projects here in the Austin area. Throughout that time, was looking on a Facebook post and saw something called Hempcrete, had no idea what it was always pretty sustainably and health conscious. And it was talking about how fireproof it was, sustainable, healthy, non-toxic material. So the Hemp Industry Association put on a hemp building course with world-renowned builder Steve Allen, also the founder of the International Hemp Building Association. Went out to Colorado and got my hands dirty for the first time with Hempcrete and was completely blown away by the material, what it can do. Really solve a lot of the quality issues. Here working in real estate in Austin, I saw a lot of mold issues as well, and had to bring this product to the Central Texas area. So the HIA was actually founding their state chapter programs at that time. So I co-founded the Texas chapter of the HIA, helped educate and educate and kind of lead the way in terms of legalization here in Texas with Coleman and Sheila Hemphill that were part of the Texas HIA as well. But my passion always lied on the building side of things. So help fundraise for a tiny hemp home out at Community First Village, which is a homeless community. Was one of the founding board members of the U.S. Hemp Building Association, and just really want to focus my real estate practice on helping bring these sustainable hemp projects to the mainstream market. So I will let Justin talk a little bit about the USHBA and Hempcrete, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, and right when we started, Hannah mentioned it, but as anyone has questions, feel free to chat them, and we'll be happy to talk through any of those on any of the material that we're talking about here. But for the U.S. Hemp Building Association, so the mission from an organizational standpoint is really the support and advocacy for hemp building professionals. A lot of those projects and building materials in the United States are just getting off the ground. So the mission with this organization is to advocate and continue to push this side of the industry forward. From a goals and objectives standpoint, one of our main big pushes is just to be a resource. We want to have a lot of information and a network of people that are, developers, designers, builders, who are involved in this space to share resources and get a better, well-rounded education of how to use these materials. Because it's a brand new material here in the United States, this industry is just getting off the ground. It really does take a community of people to push it forward. So we want to be that centerpiece, bringing those people together. Another goal is just around, improving sustainability and the quality of these homes and commercial buildings by using these materials. We'll talk a little bit more about how hemp does that in these buildings later in this presentation. We provide training and best practices for projects that do incorporate hemp in the building. There's a lot of different ways that you can use hemp in building, and a lot of lessons learned that other people that are in this space share and can build community around. There's also, because it's a building space, there are specific specifications and standards for quality control. A lot of what we want to do with this organization is get those standardized so that everyone's building safe and reliable structures. And then lastly, just fundraising so that we can continue to support these different initiatives that we're doing when it comes to specifications, standards, and different group projects that we're all working on. So what is hemp lime, hempcrete? I'm sure most of you have heard the term hempcrete. The term hemp lime is starting to be used more now because hempcrete is somewhat of a misnomenclature, just because your mind immediately will first go to, okay, it's a structural piece of material, which is not accurate. So hempcrete, it's typically a combination of hemp, which is the inner core of the hemp plant, a lime-based binder, and water. And that's really it. Those are the three main ingredients that you can see in the last picture there, creates that material that goes into the building structures. So the ratios of all three of these ingredients, they'll differ depending on the application, whether they're used, for example, in an attic or within a wall cavity. It just depends on the use case you're using this material. So hemp hurd or shiv, this is, if you're thinking about the hemp plant, this is the inner core of the stalk of the hemp plant. And you'll see in the picture here from the Hempcrete Innovation Lab, a few different examples of hemp hurd. And you can even see from this photo, there's a lot of variation in how this hurd gets processed, just depending on, like any plant, the different varietal, the way it was processed, where it was grown, all of these different factors play a role. And one of the most common questions, especially now as the CBD market has gotten so big, is can you take those same stalks that were grown for medical varieties and use them in hempcrete, which is not ideal. When you're thinking about this on an industrial standpoint, you really want that hemp hurd to have certain specifications, and that's part of what we're doing at an organizational level, is to establish what does good hemp hurd look like for building materials and what doesn't. For building, you really want a larger stalk, and it's really about the size of that stalk in terms of how thick it is. That's when you get a really good variety for hurd for building. So because of that, especially here in Texas, I think there's going to be a big opportunity for this state to focus on the industrial side rather than the health and wellness side, because of the climate and the planting seasons that we have. But it's about getting the right seeds and genetics in order to do so. So once you do and it's planted, you'll have different processing capabilities to get that to the hurd that you've seen in these pictures here. So binder, the second main ingredient, there's a few different types of binders, hydraulic lime, hydrated lime. They're very similar, although hydraulic you'll see much more in Europe. It's based off of a very specific sort of limestone that's pulled from Europe, and more in the United States, you'll see more of the hydrated lime with different minerals mixed in that help it set a little bit better. There's a few examples here. These are pre-blended binders specific for use in building materials. Hempire has their fifth element, which is a proprietary blend of binder. Limeworks, Hempcrete binder is another one. And then LCG binder. All three have slight variations, but all accomplish the same thing in terms of the building side. So the benefits of hempcrete. It's a really incredible material. And I think that's why everybody, who is speaking today is so passionate about it. When you think about just the way it's grown and it's the sustainability around it, it really makes this a really interesting material to build with. So the first and probably biggest piece is just the carbon sequestering aspect of it. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But just from an environmental standpoint, that's huge. It sequesters a lot of that CO2 that's in the air during its growth cycle. It has excellent moisture and thermal capabilities from an insulation standpoint, which is the primary use of hempcrete, which is that to create that sustainable and efficient insulation in enclosed spaces. My favorite piece and quality of it is this fire, mold, and rot resistant, which is, it's rare to find that really in any material, but there's actually been a test that's also in here that does show just how fire resistant it is, which is pretty amazing. Because of this material within the enclosed space, it actually improves the air quality in the homes as well, just because of the chemical compound and the sustainable aspect of this material, and then the reduction in RF and EMF exposure because of the insulation side of it. So there's four main insulation methods for the material. You can see examples of all four here. The first and more traditional aspect is called the cast in place, where you're using the framework system of a building and actually taking that mixture and then putting it within the wall cavity of the building. This utilizes the traditional stud framing, and it actually reduces the required framing by 40%. Now, anytime you want to do this, you always want to make sure that your plans are reviewed and approved by a structural engineer because of that. But the second method is precast blocks. So these are blocks that can be cast and cured off-site, and then using different joints to put them together. Obviously, a big pro of this, it takes a lot of that legwork out of it when comparing it to a cast in place, which is pretty labor intensive. This takes away some of that by streamlining how it's made. Again, though, a lot of that then becomes how do you transport it and making sure that you're getting to the job site efficiently. So that's where you start to see some more of these precast panels. Similar to the blocks, these are cured off-site and in controlled environment. So you don't have to worry about weather or different setting times. These are already cast and ready to go. It's just assembling the panels. And then the last, which is starting to catch a lot of good steam here in the United States, is the spray applied. In this method, it reduces a lot of those labor costs and speeds up the construction just because you don't have to wait for a lot of the packing that you have in the cast in place, and you don't have to worry about a lot of the logistics issues that you might have with the blocks or the panels. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the building materials here. We're lucky to have the experts in this space, but hemp is used in other building materials. There's insulation, hemp wool, which Tommy's going to be talking about, hemp wood, which we have Greg, he's going to be talking about, textiles, which Canada Grove does a lot of, hemp shield, which is a sealing material that is made from hemp, which creates a really, really nice and attractive finish on any of these materials. But the fact that it's made from hemp, it has a lot of the benefits of a sustainable product that you won't get using some more of the toxic finishes that are out there. And then hemp-based plastics. So this is a really exciting area and use of hemp as well. This side of the industry is still in its infancy. There's a few companies that are doing some really great stuff though. Santa Packaging, they're using hemp and creating a lot of really cool packaging that's being used in this industry, and now even outside of the hemp and cannabis industry. And then the hemp plastic company, they're starting to create different tools and different attributes and things that you can use in the construction side that's made out of this sustainable material. And obviously the big benefit from this is that you're not using that same polyethylene compounds, so this stuff biodegrades and it's much better for the environment. So it's not, although there's a lot of good that's coming from these materials and this side of the industry, there are some limitations. The first, which is, why it's so exciting to be talking to everyone, especially here in Texas, is just that aspect of having regionally grown industrial grade hemp. There's a lot of hemp being grown more for the health and wellness side. But a big push that we're really trying to do is getting more of that industrial grade seed and genetics in the ground and grown. Everything is great about the CBD and health and wellness side, but the more that we can get regionally grown and industrial grade hemp, the better. It just creates a much more efficient supply chain.
And Justin, I just am going to break in right now. Veronica actually asked about that. And if you could talk about the standards being different for the growing of fiber or the herd versus a CBD or a health and wellness plant.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And the best way to think about it is the CBD side is being used much more for a medical purpose. So there's a little bit more of an artisanal planting style for that. It requires a little bit more space between plants. You really need to make sure that it's getting the proper nutrients, the proper climate control, watching it very closely. What's great about the industrial species of the plant is that you can grow it much closer together and really think about it more as a commodity crop where you can plant a lot of it. But again, it really comes back to making sure that you have the right varietal of it that's going to get the long stalks with the thicker stalks. But being in Texas, that species of plant, and they're still doing a lot of research around this. Texas A&M, they're actually just about to launch, or they might already be doing it, a big research project on that exactly to really find out what makes this industrial hemp plant grow at its finest rate. So once that's grown, I mean, the other side of it that's just as important is the processing. Because as you grow this plant, you cut it from the ground, and you want to make sure that as it goes through that processing, you're getting a very good split between the fiber and the herd. Because the more dust that you have in it, it creates more air pockets. So some dust is okay. It creates that insulation value that you want to see in insulation, but you don't want it to be overly dusty. You also don't want it to be overly packed with fiber. So it's a fine balance between that and getting the right machinery together to do that. On top of it, it's making sure that you have those facilities that are regionally accessible. So here in Texas, there's a few that are coming online that should be a pretty good sign of just how ahead of the game Texas can get if we have industrial plants in the ground and focused on industrial processing. It's going to put us way ahead of the rest of the country in terms of really getting a head start on the industrial side. So all of that, the quality control obviously plays a big role as well. Like I said, that goes into what species of plants, types of processing facilities, the labor, although the application itself is somewhat of an easy process to learn. You still need to learn it. You still need to learn the ins and outs of it to make sure that it's being properly installed. And that goes from everything from not only labor, but architects, engineers, contractors who are familiar and know how to build with the material. Local building codes is another limitation right now, because although this material has been used a lot overseas, it's been in Europe for years, the codes here in the United States aren't reflective of that. So a lot of as these buildings are going up, is on a case-by-case within each building code and making sure that you're getting the proper permits, which can be a lengthy process in itself. Understanding that material compatibility, obviously you want to make sure that you're understanding what all goes into using these materials. And then the upfront construction costs can be about 10 to 30% higher than traditional stick frame construction, just because of everything above. Now, as more of these limitations start to be solved, we start getting more industrial plants in the ground, we start to see more processing facilities go up, it just creates more and more of this streamlined supply chain, which is what is really going to take this industry forward.
And this is where I'll take over. Thanks, Justin. So yeah, one of the biggest benefits and components of Hempcrete is really the difference between operational energy and carbon, or embodied energy and carbon. And this is something that It really woke me up when I first learned about Hempcrete. I never really knew about embodied energy versus operational energy. So the operational energy is just the energy that your built environment and structure uses once it's already built and ready to go. But the embodied energy encompasses everything that it took to build that structure, the manufacturing of those materials and where they were sourced from, the transportation, the assembly, the use, how much energy does it take to maintain it, and also how is it disposed? Is it a sustainable, efficient way of disposal, or there are going to be disposal issues as well? So that's something that is huge about the use of hempcrete, especially with the construction industry. The construction industry accounts for almost 40% of our global CO2 emissions. So if hempcrete can be, or hemp-based building materials can be, a solution to reducing the amount of CO2, then that'll play a huge part in just helping solve the overall CO2 emission issue. This is a slide from Bruce King's New Carbon Architecture, which is a great book if you're looking to understand the built environment and how carbon plays a part in that. But this is just a chart on where they did a 4x8 foot wall using different types of insulation. And hempcrete was the most carbon sequestering insulation material from all of those. Huge difference between your typically used fiberglass bad insulation and even some mineral wool. Straw bale actually, performed pretty well, but hempcrete was definitely the most carbon sequestering. And a lot of people ask throughout which process is this happening? So most of the CO2 sequestration is happening during the growth of the hemp plant itself. Hemp is one of the most carbon sequestering plants in the plant kingdom. And then also the other part of it is the recalcification of the hemp and lime herd when you're doing your hempcrete mix. So that accounts for about 10% of that CO2 sequestration. A little bit about the history of hempcrete. It's had its renaissance back in the 70s with Charles Rossetti out of France. They were looking to use a better material to help maintain their structures. They were typically using some sort of Portland cement that would really degrade pretty quickly. And the issue with Portland cement most of the time is that it's not vapor permeable. You're not able to release or absorb the moisture as needed. So he began using a hempcrete mixture and found that given its vapor permeability and with the natural lime mix, it was able to restore structures much better. Also to the left is an example of the Miyasa-Mura Japanese house. This is a famous kind of historic building that they have. It wasn't using hempcrete, but they used a bunch of hemp stalks and fibers for roofing and even for part of the structural framework as well. There are quite a bit of large commercial projects out there. Here in the States, unfortunately, we haven't gotten to that point just yet. There actually is a building that Hempcrete built for public use out in Idaho, but out in the UK, to your top left is affordable housing project. Which is great. The entire structure was built using hempcrete. To the right is a gorgeous condominium development out of Italy. And then to the bottom left corner is a Marks and Spencer's department store building out of the UK as well. And some of the department stores have found, almost 30 to 50% reduction of energy use of their buildings due to the thermal capacity and mass that hempcrete has. There's quite a bit of U.S. projects as well. To the top left, you have the Highland Hemp House out of Bellingham, Washington. This was probably one of the largest scale hempcrete buildings at that time. To the bottom left, you have one of the first hempcrete structures built in Asheville, North Carolina, which was built for the city mayor. The Wonder Workshop out of Denver, Colorado. Eric McKee, who was one of the founders of the USHBA. This was the first city permitted hempcrete structure in Denver, so it was a really big deal. And then down here at the bottom right-hand corner is another hempitecture project, partnered with the Mayor Chandra. That was the first sprayed applied hempcrete structure in the U.S. out of Warrenton, Missouri. So that was a huge deal as well, because it helped increase the efficiency and installation time, which sometimes is a cost barrier for people to use hempcrete. So, and then here in the middle is a good old truth window. Once you got the plaster or your drywall up or magnesium oxide board, you can see the type of insulation you have. And this is out of a house in Haley, Idaho, that we visited at the U.S. Hemp Building Summit last year. So good old Texas, we got to see, some of the projects here, which we do have some, which is really exciting. This was actually a Hempcrete training course that I did, but the owner, Yusuf Ben Yuda, had some land out in Marfa and wanted to use Hempcrete. So he built 2 structures out there. One of the great unique things about it, this middle picture here is magnesium oxide board, which is a vapor permeable drywall replacement, non-toxic and fireproof as well. And also served as the interior form board. And I like to notate this because you can see kind of the moisture there on the bottom. And given the heat out there, the moisture would seep through, but by the next day it would turn into dust. And that hempcrete and moisture was already starting to dry. So this was a great project. This is Community First Village. This is one that I actually help fundraise and project manage. Community First Village is a homeless community in East Austin where they have tiny homes and RVs to help the chronically homeless, and they also have 20% on-site volunteers to help run the community, and was really put this project together to help educate and try to get hemp legalized in Texas as well. A lot of representatives didn't understand that hemp could be used on these types of applications. So we wanted this to be a site that they can go visit and get inspired on the industrial side of things. Also, a great thing about this project, hemp shield was used for all of the cedar, which is great. They've actually done some studies at Oregon State University on how hemp shield has lasted quite a bit longer than your typical wood sealants that you would find. This is another project in Texas, in Lindale, Texas. Left Hand Hemp, which is a hemp building company out of Colorado, did one as well. I believe Lindale is close to Dallas, or about an hour or so away from Dallas. And the last one I have here is an incredible project that Hempitecture just finished working on out in the Texas Hill Country for a private client that incorporated hempcrete, but also with a Japanese Minka framework, which that framework is over 300 years old. If you want to get more details on the build and how that went, Matt Reisinger with the Build Show actually did an incredible YouTube video on this as well that you guys should go check out. So one of the main aspects that are really needed to help push the building side forward is building certification. ASTM and ICC certification can really start to encourage manufacturers, builders, developers to begin to use these types of materials. So the ASTM actually has a committee on cannabis. It's called the D37 committee. and they have shown a lot of interest on wanting to help develop Hempcrete standards. There is a test, an ASTM E84, which is a fire spread and fire smoke test that Hempcrete did for that Texas Hill Country project. And the test was actually done at a facility in San Antonio. So we have that here in our backyard in Texas, and came back with a flame spread index score of 0 and smoke developed index spread of 0. So at least here in the States, you would see a lot of videos of people just fire torching hempcrete blocks and showing that it's not fireproof, or that it is fireproof and smoke proof. But a lot of people wouldn't take that seriously, or you can't go to your city code enforcement and show them, hey, look, this isn't going to cause any fires. But the fact that we have an ASTM test out there actually proving this is huge to be able to show our city officials and other builders and developers. So huge ups to Hempcrete for putting that together. And then also there's quite a bit of university research involvement in this space. So we got a few universities out of Kentucky. There's one out of California, UC Riverside and Murray State. The Healthy Materials Lab, Parsons New School, did an incredible research project, a hemp lime research project that you can download from their website as well, really breaking down the history of hemp, of lime, and just hemp lime construction as a whole. And the UT Materials Lab as well at the School of Architecture has started to dive into hempcrete research also. So really exciting stuff coming from the university side that we need to help support this industry. And then lastly, it's what's next. You know, finding out, like Justin had mentioned before, what are the best varieties to grow for manufacturing and processing and shib and fiber. Can it be a dual crop? We definitely want to make sure that we can help maximize the profitability for our farmers and really support them. You know, since I got into this industry and always being health conscious, I've always, you know, and coming here in Austin, you know, always heard about farm to table. Being born and raised in Miami, never really heard about that until recently. And so I kind of see hemp being able to bring this farm to home to the construction industry as well. So, and then also getting the proper processing for these building materials, but more importantly, just getting the facilities set up to begin to get our trial and error down and really have a good local source for processing for our farmers. And these are some rough estimates that I've gotten from some people in Europe. Some have estimated 2.5 acres of hemp could equal a 1,200 square foot home. Obviously, that just depends the variety, how close together they're grown. So these are all rough estimates, but this is the type of research that we need to do with universities and processors and growers to really hone in on this, to understand, you know, how the construction market from a number standpoint can support the processing and the farmers. And then also looking for locally sourced binders. You know, here in Texas, we have a lot of limestone and a lot of clays and local pozzolans. We can make our own localized binders here and really regionalize the supply chain, which lowers the embodied energy of the building structures that we have and reduces the cost of these materials.
Okay, so one big upcoming event, the Hemp Building Summit, which is a great event that Hempcrete hosts out in Ketchum, Idaho. Just with everything going on, it's going virtual this year, but brings together a lot of really great speakers, a lot of really great thought leaders in the space. So a great educational piece, also a really great networking event. And there's a discount code that Hannah will be sending out to the participants as well, if you want to sign up for that. And then just a few resources here, you know, just if you want to learn more about building with hemp, obviously you can reach out to Henry and I just as the Texas regional leaders, but these are some other resources that you can check out. Building with hemp is kind of the original Bible when it comes to hemp building. Steve Allen wrote that. He's based out of Europe and the founder of the International Hemp Building Association. The Hempcrete book is another great one that really gets into the nitty gritty of how to build it, and some really great lessons learned just through trial and error that are outlined in that book. Chris Magwood is based out of Canada and is a really big name when it comes to sustainable building. And he has an essential hempcrete construction. This is a really great, lean, kind of almost like a Hempcrete for Dummies sort of book. It's a really, really great, easy to read book. As Henry mentioned, the Parsons Healthy Materials Lab is an awesome resource really for any sustainable building materials, but they've done a really deep research project into hemp and lime, and talk a little bit about the history of that in their podcast as well. Workshop Guide is just, another book, and then Hemp Lime Construction, a couple other books here just to check out to learn more. And then just lastly, how to get involved with the USHBA. Obviously, just become a member. That's the first step. You can get involved just by reaching out to us, as your local reps here, donating just to get some of these certifications together. That's really one of the biggest things that we're working on from an organizational standpoint, because that's what pushes this industry forward to make it more commercialized. Connecting with local building industry and sustainability groups, getting involved there, talking to your friends or colleagues if you're in the space to get them involved, attending workshops, reading one of those books, researching, and then we'll have a few upcoming events. Just with everything going on, we're working through what that looks like, but we'll be putting on a few events in the coming year.
We'll hand it over to Hannah.
That's my cue. I'm also going to ask Andrea Salas to unmute on video if she can. She's on here with me.
Hi there.
Partner in all things hemp, Texas hemp related. So gentlemen, before we hand it over, there's a couple, I would love to do the introductions and maybe open this up for all of our panelists. We did have a couple questions come through. So Greg, we know that you're here. Tommy, we know you're here. Thank you for being here through the presentation, and we're really looking forward to hearing from each of you also. So the questions are, the first one was from Jim, and he asked about how long does it take for hemp plastic to biodegrade? Do we have any statistics on that?
Yeah, and it takes, last I read, it was 3 to 6 months. I think that also depends on what goes into that, but that's been the range that I've seen for that material.
Okay. And is the hemp plastic company, are they also doing research on that? Is that part of their offerings?
I can't say. I don't know what their involvement in the research side, but I know there are a lot of sustainability groups. I know that was actually one that UT, part of their building lab, I asked about that if they had anything. So that was something that I know was on their radar, but I'm not sure how much research has gone into that. I don't know, Henry, if you know.
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay, we're good. All right, next question was from Kevin, and he wants to talk about the growing and the testing process. And I even know that we have some members that are on the call that could probably answer this, who've been through it this year. But for ease of answering, do you guys who wants to take that on?
In terms of testing for?
So the question was, does growing industrial hemp require the same testing from TDA?
I would assume it would. I think regardless of what you're growing for, you would need to still be within that, 0.3% or lower limit. But, hopefully we can raise that limit a little bit higher to 1% to have some more variation. But on an industrial application, I think it would apply the same.
It does, yeah. So how the flowers have the predominant amount of cannabinoids in them. And so when we're testing, that's typically what you test, you clip the flowers. So when you grow the industrial stalks, kind of like behind Greg's picture, right? They're very tall and skinny, and just at the top, they may have some cluster, but it's also fairly seedy, right? So there's a lot of seeds in there. And so, yes, the flowers still have to be tested. Yes, they still have to remain under that 0.3% per the federal limit. Texas only follows the federal guidelines, not federal laws. And so you will still need to be tested. It's also part of keeping your certification with Texas Department of Agriculture that you have those final tests and you show those, because there's a number of reports that you need to submit as part of the growing process here in Texas. So yes, you do need your testing. Yes, it's the same process as any other hemp plant right now.
Hannah, I want to just thank Cree for he responded to the panelists that yes, the testing is still required. So thank you so much, Cree. And then yes, of course, the top 6 inches of the plant. So thanks a lot, Cree, for those responses.
Yes, thank you. And then we had one other question from Jim, and he was asking about the current hemp processors. And so I'll take a stab at this at first and then open it up to the panelists. So what we know so far is that there are no industrial hemp processors in Texas at this time. Panda Biotech or Panda has come out with a number of news releases, and I think that they have moved forward with a property in Wichita Falls in order to build a processing facility for hemp that would be used primarily for fiber. So again, we're kind of looking at, there's different outputs that come from the hemp plant. Fiber is one used more for the material side. And then the hurd is another used a lot for the construction side. And then obviously the flowers for health and wellness. And so Panda is the one processing facility, at least we have heard of, that is planning to come into Texas for that. And again, the reason we're having this webinar is to see who on this call is interested in building one or participating in one, so we can get a group of people together and move more processing facilities forward. So with that, I'll open it up to the panelists, and Andrea, maybe you want to chime in there, but those are the industrial processing facilities that we know about right now.
I also want to address, Kevin had another question about, in addition to construction, can Hempcrete be used as structural slabs, or is it primarily used for walls? And perhaps we'll be getting into a lot of that content as we move forward in the presentation. And so we'll hold that question, Kevin, and we can probably go ahead and introduce Greg and Tommy, who's joined us, if there's no other questions at this time.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I want to thank Greg.
First up, and we don't see your video. I just want to let you know I'm seeing that you're muted and not videoed.
That's Greg, correct? Yes, there he is.
Yes, wonderful.
I'm right here.
I'd love for you.
Sorry, I'm
ahead.
unloading a whole bunch of hemp wood, actually to a customer as we speak.
So you are potentially otherwise engaged. All right. Should we give you a couple minutes and go to Tommy, since Tommy's ready?
No, I'm good to go.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And we are very excited to have you here with us. And without further ado, Greg Wilson with Hempwood.
Hey, so this is Greg Wilson with Hempwood. Our company's name is actually Fibonacci. We make many different types of building materials, all in the renewable resource segment. So I started my career in bamboo. I built 53 of these facilities, or was a part of building 53 of these, what we call block factories in China over the last 14 years. It then moved into recycling woods in Australia and Poland and the Ukraine, and hempwood has been my homecoming. So we have something we call biomimicry, where we reconfigure the cell structure of a plant and turn it into a replacement for wood. The general idea or general thesis of this is that we use a fast growing plant fiber, such as hemp that grows in 4 months, and we use that to replace 60-year-old oak, or in effect replacing 200-year-old tropical hardwoods. So the whole key to the process is compressing a plant fiber that grows very fast, that typically has a low density, with a bio-based adhesive inside of that. And when your density is high, then your hardness and your stability are also high. And so it's essentially one algorithm that we have then turned in.
Greg, you cut out. Is anybody else hearing him? Henry, can you hear him?
Nope.
Nope.
Greg? Okay, thanks, Nathan. Where's Greg? Okay, Greg, we lost you.
That delivery got him.
Hopefully not.
Want to give him another minute? If not, we'll hop over to Tommy and jump back.
Yeah. Yeah. Greg, was that you? Thank you, attendees, for being patient with us. You know, these technical difficulties. No matter how long we've been using Zoom, it feels like there's always some glitch, some unanticipated glitch. So, Tommy, do you mind taking over and sharing your portion right now? Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. Thanks for coming on, and thanks, Henry and Justin, for a really awesome presentation. You guys have been doing great evangelical work out in Texas, getting people to know and care about these building materials. And it's something that we feel very passionately about. So it's great to share that passion and share that with some growers, because it truly is a huge supply chain from a customer that buys a building material to a farmer who grows some hemp plant, that we need to bring it all together in the United States. So it takes conversations like these to get us moving forward. So I'm going to talk to you guys about Hempwool, and it's one of our probably most interesting products because it's very well suited for the building industry as the industry currently stands. We talked about Hempcrete and casting and forming walls, or spraying them, or Hempcrete blocks, and right now that's not what typical residential or commercial construction looks like. It's wood frame houses with 5.5 inch or 3.5 inch cavities filled with batt insulation. And that batt insulation is usually fiberglass or mineral wool or something like spray foam. So being able to use a naturally growing fiber and have that same performance is a huge chance to turn buildings from something that's made with a petrochemical product or a depleting mineral resource and actually make it from a renewable plant resource. So Hempcrete specializes in all types of hemp-based building materials. We are a for-profit public benefit corporation. That means, we're just like a C Corp, like any other corporation, but in addition to having shareholders, we also have explicit goals that contribute to the public good that we take a lot of every year and make sure we're pursuing. We're based in Ketchum, Idaho, which is quite a distance away from where you guys are, but it's not too far a distance for our team to drive down to Austin, Texas and do a project. So we really do travel all over the United States as we've been working to build this industry, because what we specifically offer as a company is the manufacture and distribution of hemp-based building materials, both for creating Hempcrete as well as our hemp wool installation and even some other drywall replacement type products that are hemp derived. We offer training and consultation with industry professionals. I would loop the Hemp Building Summit, which is going to be a great education event for anyone interested into that training. But we also have people out to Ketchum, Idaho to learn how to work with our materials. Henry actually came to one of our contractor training sessions, and that's been a great way for us to get, take the theory as well as the practice and give people the training and experience they need to be able to incorporate hemp building materials into their construction practices. And then we do on-site professional installation. So we've traveled to Missouri and Texas and California and Washington, and even as far as New York, actually, to do building projects. And we're doing less and less of that now as the industry's gotten much bigger. We can't possibly be on site for every single hemp building project that goes on in the United States. But it is something that is deep in our roots, is knowing how those materials are actually installed on a job site. So let's talk about hemp wool. And I've got 2 different samples in front of me right here. And I wish, you know, we had our entire office insulated with hemp wool, and the sound was much better and the comfort was much better, but we actually pulled the panels out of this wall to insulate a mountain cabin this weekend. And so we're waiting for replacement panels. So please excuse the appearance. And you just imagine hemp wool in there just like that, because that's usually what it looks like, unfortunately. So our hemp wool installation comes in 5.5-inch widths and 3.5-inch widths, that corresponding with R values of R13 for the 3.5, R20 for the 5.5. That's pretty much standard with bad insulation, whether it's fiberglass or mineral wool. So that it's a very energy efficient insulator when you consider how much depth it actually is. And how do we stack up relative to other insulation products? Well, not only are we non-toxic because we don't use any chemicals that could potentially off-gas or emit toxins in their manufacturing, but we actually absorb carbon because the hemp fiber during its growth cycle is a net negative crop that absorbs more carbon than it emits in both its growth and manufacturing. So when you look at other insulation materials out there, in the bottom left, you're looking at kind of the unfriendly ones, high density spray foam, EPS, XPS, and then moving to the upper right quadrant, you see things like sheep's wool, cellulose, which is recycled paper insulation, and then finally hemp wool. And then kind of straddling those 2 sides are fiberglass insulation, which is roughly half the insulation market. That's the pink stuff that I'm sure you've seen in crawl spaces and attics before. And then rock wool, which is a rapidly growing insulation material, very similar to hemp wool, except that it's made from basalt rock fibers. So there are concerns about the manufacturing of that product and what that could contribute to the environmental air quality of the surrounding area. There's me on site, just like Greg's delivering to a customer. You know, I gotta stuff the customer's walls sometimes and make sure that the job is done properly as we just teach more and more people to do this, even though honestly it's a very easy material to work with. It's completely non-abrasive. You don't need any gloves to work with it. Maybe when you're cutting it, you'd wear a dust mask, but it's really an installer's dream compared to fiberglass or rock wool or spray foam where you need a full hazmat suit to do the installation. Hemp wool is something that's very DIY friendly, or any basic job labor can hop in and help install hemp wool. So you can see the technical data sheet right here, and I didn't include pricing because our pricing's just changed, but I'm happy if you guys are curious of using this on a project. And a lot of people who are hemp growers themselves like to have buildings on their premises that are insulated with hemp building materials. And so I'm happy to help get you quotes if you're interested. But when you're looking at insulation material, the major thresholds that we need to meet are fire resistance and thermal resistance. So fire resistance, of course, because if something happens to your building, they want to make sure that the wall assembly is rated for enough time so that the fire department can come and put it out within usually an hour is that rating that they look for. And then thermal resistance, because the government has a vested interest in making sure that homes are well insulated so they don't use more energy than they have to. So it's the ASTM E84 test that tests fire resistance. Henry alluded to that earlier for Hempcrete. Hempcrete has basically a perfect fire testing. That's because of the lime, the mineral part of the biocomposite is not flammable. Hemp wool does not have perfect fire resistance. It will catch fire, and it does have an ignition time of about 7 seconds. That said, it does have a Class A fire rating, so it is fit for code, just like fiberglass has a Class A fire rating. But you may want to consider adding different fireproof elements in your wall assembly. The thermal resistance measurement for Hempcrete is quite exciting. It's R3.7 per inch. Again, that's R13 for a 3.5-inch bat and R20 for a 5.5-inch bat. So that's very competitive with other products out there for thermal efficiency. And these panels, let's see, I do have one kind of full one in the top corner there. They are 4 feet long, and they come in widths of either 16 inches or 24 inches. And that's really great because standard American wood frame construction, the studs are separated by either 16 inches or 24 inches on center. And so it's a pressure fit system where the panel fits and all the way to the sides of the cavity, making sure there's no leaks or gaps or possibility for thermal bridging. And each panel is 4 feet tall. So, you stack 2 on each other, you're getting 8 feet, which is usually a common wall height as well. So installation can be very, very fast. I've actually installed this in my own crawl space, and it took less than an hour to do the entire 400 square feet of crawl space. And so it's a really easy material to work with, and it installs very quickly. One thing I would note is we talked about processing and hemp hurd for Hempcrete. The hemp wool comes from the fiber of the plant. So I think it was Helen who was talking, or Hannah was talking about fiber for materials, usually like car parts sometimes use the fiber. That's just the stringy little pieces that are responsible for carrying the water up and down the plant. And that's what it is, the feedstock for this hemp wool insulation. It's 92% hemp fiber, 8% polyester. It's a non-woven manufacturing process that creates these batch sheets. And so we aren't manufacturing this ourselves yet, but in the very foreseeable future, we could see manufacturing plants all over the United States that will need a feedstock of hemp fibers to be able to produce this insulation material. So when you're thinking about growing for hemp and farming hemp, and then looking ahead to the conclusion of a value-added product that comes from your harvest, just know it's really a matter of taking the biomass, separating the hurd and the fiber, of which there's several machines and processes to do so, and then that fiber can go right into an insulation bat manufacturer and make this hemp wool insulation that we're so happy about. So I'll pause there. I know I just regurgitated a lot of information, but hemp wool gets me very excited. It's been a very popular product for us. We've sold a lot of it to our customers just over the past year, and it's something that we see a lot of growth potential in.
Yes. Yeah, this is an excellent presentation, and it is definitely, Henry, would you mind hopping back on that one for just a second? It's very good, I know, for our audience, for the attendees, to see what is being done right now and what it takes to make sure that we have products that are viable in the construction market. And that's what you've done with both Hempcrete and the specific hemp wool, by making sure that your ASTM standards are up to date, and that you're able to prove a viable product. So thank you for your efforts there. Greatly appreciate that. I'm just going through the questions really quick to see if there were any. There was a comment on the picture about not having to wear protective gear to install insulation.
Yeah. No, when you're cutting it, maybe you'd want to have a mask on, just because the fibers can go anywhere. But if you're just dealing with full bats, it's super simple. You could wear gloves, but really your hand will just get dry, because the hemp is very good at absorbing water and moisture, which makes it a good insulation for combating mold, as well as offsetting the excess moisture inside of a building. But you don't need to be wearing gloves. You don't need eye protection. Just when you're cutting the hemp wool, it's nice to have a mask to protect yourself from. Okay. Always wear days anyway, I guess. So
thank you. And then Tommy, you mentioned earlier that you guys are also the manufacturer and retailer. So one of the questions that came through was, where do you currently source the fiber from? And if those are processing facilities, can you just share a little bit about what your supply chain looks like to produce hemp wool that is distributed around the U.S.?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And when I say we manufacture, we do not manufacture this material yet. We have a distribution relationship with a company that's based in northeastern Canada, and they use Canadian hemp fiber as well as French hemp fiber to feed their machines. So I believe it's 80% local Quebec hemp fiber and 20% imported French fiber to make their product.
Okay. Okay. And do you know if that fiber is specifically produced for fiber, or is it a byproduct of another hemp cannabis product that's being created?
My understanding is this is intentionally long fiber variety of hemp. And I know we were talking earlier about which type of hemp can be processed to produce the materials that eventually get turned into building products. My understanding is both the CBD variety and the long fiber variety both contain fiber and hurd. It's just a matter of processing efficiency. And when you have the long fiber, you're able to work through a lot of material through a decorticator machine. Whereas if you have a short, bushy CBD plant with a lot of branches, you may not be able to as efficiently extract and separate the hurd and fiber. I think there is technology coming down the line that's going to allow both the CBD plant and the long fiber plant to be processed similarly easily. And because I really don't think we've seen the heyday of technical processing, because we're still relying on equipment that's coming from Europe and Canada, and American processors are just getting off the ground.
Okay, and so just to reiterate, because we did have a couple questions coming in, the actual processing and manufacturing of the hemp wool is currently being done in Canada, and they're using a blend of 80-20, 80% Quebec fiber that is grown for fiber, and 20% French fiber, probably that is grown for fiber also.
Correct, Hannah. And I'll also convey to you guys, just to communicate the urgency. You know, one of our biggest costs for this material is transportation, and shipping it from our manufacturer to our clients or to our warehouse brings a huge added cost. And we are very much looking forward to the day where we have local sources of fiber, local sources of production, and can be shipping to local building projects, because that'll bring the cost down for everyone.
That is why we're having this webinar, to make sure we start our own supply chain so we can have a hemp wool processing facility here in Texas. We've got enough buildings that could use it, I'm sure. All right, wonderful. Did we lose Greg? I see him still on the panelists. Greg, are you able to hop back on?
Yes, I am. I'm in a more
Wonderful.
stable environment right now.
Okay, we're going to kick it back to Greg and let you finish your presentation. Thank you for sticking around. And Tommy, thank you again. That was an excellent explanation of what you have going on, and thank you for being a resource for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hannah. Take it away, Greg.
Hey, thanks, Tommy. So my apologies, but business must get done. So I'm in Nashville today, delivering wood and visiting all our architects and designers, because we are the only manufacturer of hemp wood in the world. And from my understanding, the only manufacturer that has scaled using fiber in the United States. We currently have 22 employees in West Kentucky. We're in Murray, Kentucky, next to Murray State University, where we are members of the Agricultural Hemp Innovation Center. We're actually one of the founding members. We use several thousand tons of hemp per year. We use the entire stalk. The stalk actually has the top removed for the seed and flower first, and then the remaining 4 to 6 feet of stalk that is left over is what gets baled up and sent to our factory, as many trucks as we can get in the door during harvest season. So we do have a fully functioning, fully assembled manufacturing facility that we are operating 6 days a week. We can do up to 1 ton of hemp processing per hour. So we are cranking out hemp wood as fast as we can, getting into as many commercial builds, and now we're starting to get into residential builds as we can. We're specifying it all over the place for your different eco-friendly tourisms, for our industry partners in the hemp industry or in the MJ industry. We have a lot of different yoga studios and coffee shops, and you name it. We can do kitchens, we can do flooring, we can do furniture, we do wood walls. Essentially, if you would use white oak for your project, then you can use hemp wood. There's several different ways that we can cut it and several different formats that we can sell it. But the primary piece that we manufacture is called a cant in the wood industry. And it is essentially a squared off log. And so in squaring off a log in the forest, then it makes it much more transportable to go to your sawmill or your flooring factory or your furniture mill. And so we are compressing hemp stalks with a bio-based adhesive, similar to what you use in pure bond plywood. And this stuff, actually, we dilute the glue so we can submerge our full hemp stalks after we've crushed open the cell structure of it. We submerge it into the glue for 10 minutes. which is a diluted down version of the Pure Bond plywood glue. We then take it out and dry it to a certain moisture content before we batch weigh it and press it with 3,000 tons of pressure. And pressing it with 3,000 tons of pressure, we're making a 6x6 wood cant, or a block that we like to call it. And we bake it in an oven. It gets baked in an oven for about 10 hours. Once it comes out, we let it stabilize and rest for about 2 weeks. And then we cut it into 1x6s is our standard cut, but we also have all different types of cuts and shapes and forms and sizes that we do. There's a whole lot of science and a whole lot of math and a whole lot of engineering that goes into what we do. So it all follows a specific algorithm that we've been using for bamboo and for fast growing eucalyptus and for recycling woods for the last 15 or 16 years. So essentially, we are taking something that grows in 4 months. We're adding a bio-based glue that uses soy proteins, and we're turning it into a replacement for any of your domestic hardwoods and most of your exotic tropical hardwoods. We have the same density as a Brazilian cherry, and we have a hardness 25% greater than hickory. So if you're trying to compare it to something, it's a unique animal all to its own, but it is readily available and on the shelves and ready for shipping. We try to get stuff out next week. If somebody places an order that's not too custom, we try to have it out the door within a week. So due to COVID, it allowed us to concentrate more on our factory build out. We've been automating the facility for the last 6 months. We've just started to travel to hit the market again since August. So since August, I've been in Oregon, where we're actually setting up another facility next year. We're in the process of getting that all together and specifying all the required utilities for bringing into the building and things like that. We're up in Pennsylvania, where we're looking at partnering up to do something up there. And that one we hope to have online for next year, but it could be the year after. It all depends if 2021 wants to repeat 2020. We have our main facility, which is in Murray, Kentucky, about 90 miles west of Nashville. And we've got some plans of doing something in the Midwest, and we can't figure out, is that Texas, is that Colorado, or is that Montana? So our product has gone through all of the ASTM standard requirements in the wood flooring or building materials industry. That is ASTM 1037. We have our JANCA hardness, we have our VOC emissions, we have our fire testing, we have our smoke testing, we have our slip resistance, which is more based on the coating that you use, but we use a Bona coating, and we're installing these things all over. We're trying to scale this up to make it price competitive with white oak. We're getting fairly close to that, and we expect to be there by the beginning of the year. Right now, our lumber is by the individual piece. You're talking 20 or 30 bucks a board. If you're buying it by the pallet, that number gets cut almost in half. And if you're doing installs such as flooring or accent walls or countertops or things like that, we're getting pretty competitive with your higher end domestic hardwoods. So the testing is done, the technology is there, the factory is built, and we need lots of you people to start putting it into your new builds, into your offices or your hemp stores or your homes, because we have built it. And now that our capacity is ramping up, we need everybody to come, as they say.
I mean, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Greg, can you tell us a little bit about the type of fiber that you specify, or the type of varietal that you specify for your wood?
Okay, yeah. So we have 2 different programs for our raw material coming in. Everything comes in within 100 miles of the facility if it's a square bale. Everything comes in within 60 miles of the facility if it's a round bale, due to transportation costs with the amount of fiber that we're bringing in. Round bales, we usually get about 12 to 14 tons on a truck, and that 12 to 14 tons comes in the format of about 33 round bales, 5-foot round bales. The best practice for us is a dual crop. So a dual crop would be someone's making some money off of the top of the plant, whether it's the seed or the flower, and they set the harvesting head at 4.5 to 6 feet high, and they take off the top of the crop, separating the flower and the seed into the back of their combine or their truck that's getting pulled behind the tractor. And then we come back 2 days later with a sickle bar and cut it down and let it dry in the field for a couple of days. We come and windrow it and turn it over, let it dry for a couple more days, and then bale it and send it to the plant at less than 15% moisture content. So that is your dual variety. And then we also have this year about 400 acres, it might end up being 350, of our dedicated fiber crop. The dedicated fiber crop, you usually plant at a little bit higher seeding rate. You're usually 50 pounds plus per acre, where the dual crop, you're 50 pounds minus, somewhere 45, something like that. There's some Polish varieties that work pretty well. There's a guy named Witold over at the Polish Institute, Natural Fiber Institute, who has some genetics that are pretty good. There's Italian genetics like Aletta Campagna that did really, really well last year. You also have some autoflower Chinese varieties that do not do as well as far as the amount of material you get per acre, but those ones you can plant later in the season, even in July, so you can get your winter wheat out in June and then plant your autoflowers that aren't waiting on the daylight hours. So you can get those in July and then cut them in September, October. There's also a common practice that a lot of people like to get it in the ground the end of April, beginning of May, whenever you're not having your frost anymore. And then they can harvest it in July and get their beans to rotate after in the same year. So there's a whole lot of ways of going about it. Nobody really knows the answer to what is best, but I can say that Dr. Brandon from Murray State University has more experience than anyone in the United States legally growing agricultural hemp, because he was the first one to put it in the ground in 2014. When he got his seeds and put them in the ground in May in 2014, the DEA showed up the next day and asked him to get those seeds back. And he said, there's a couple of acres out back if you want to start digging. So that was, in my understanding, the first crop to get in the ground in 2014. And that's what actually lured me to West Kentucky from China, where I'd been doing all of my bamboo and wood facilities. Just because Dean Brandon said, yeah, we'll take the risk, let's go. And so he set me up on one of the farms at the university where we set up a pilot plant and we started doing our testing and trials and things like that. And we actually have patents on everything that we're doing. We have trademarks on the word, we have trademarks on the logo. I mean, we've been doing it right. And so we've been doing the R&D since about 2010 in the nanotech labs overseas that I had in Australia and in China, and then actually concentrating on making hempwood since 2014 when the Farm Bill on a state-by-state basis came into play. And then 2018, it was time to sell the house and build the factory, because if we didn't make it happen in that year, then it was not going to happen. And that was before they approved the Farm Bill officially, that we broke ground, but it was perfectly legal and bankable and transportable in the state of Kentucky where we were and where we are still.
Yeah, Greg, that's awesome. We've had a couple of questions come in. Can you share a little bit about how the flooring holds up with moisture?
Yes. So in order to make sure that it meets all of the requirements that you need, we have done it in an engineered platform. So engineered platform means that you cut a top layer and you put it onto a piece of plywood, and then it performs with the same attributes as a piece of engineered oak. And that way it's not as susceptible to water or moisture that you have in your areas such as Florida or Georgia. When I first started doing wood flooring, you could do solid wood the whole way down to the Florida-Georgia line. Now, due to climate change, whether people like to believe it or not, I'm a hunter and I'm a fisherman, and I see that the fish are migrating at different times of the year because the water is warmer. The ducks and geese are not coming down from Canada in the same patterns as they used to because it's a little bit warmer. And so they don't have to come as far down south. And the wood building materials industry is actually receding from where you can use a solid wood product. So it used to be Florida, Georgia, the whole way up to Canada. Now, most people are not doing a solid in Georgia, which is the home of the wood flooring industry, where you've got Mohawk and Armstrong both based. But due to humidity and frequent rainstorms, you can't use a solid. So climate change is forcing us to change the way that we create building materials because of the drastic swings in your temperature. And so we found a format that performs as good or better, according to water, as your engineered oak.
Excellent. Thank you.
Rick, we had another question. I heard you say that it's been bankable, model that you have. Can you give us any insight on the insurability of the crop that you do?
Oh yeah, actually, I was just talking to the insurance agent from the federal, I don't even know what her department is, but they come down all the time. They have a minimal insurance for the crop, but you're still rolling the dice with growing hemp. So there is no means of insuring completely what you do. When I say it's bankable, one of my investors is a founder of a local state bank. And so being a founder of a local state bank, he said, if you're not able to use the same banks that I use, which were PNC, a national bank, for my other flooring companies, he said, we've got you covered in the state of Kentucky if you want to build a plant here. So that's when I say bankable. I have a state regulated bank that allows me to bank whatever I want, because prior to that, I had to name my company Fibonacci, which is a tribute to Fibonacci, the Italian mathematician from 1,000 years ago that figured out phi, which is the second most common number in nature, and we use in our manufacturing algorithm. Because we couldn't do wire transfers or ship hempwood across state lines, I had to name my company something completely different.
Yes, that still is happening, isn't it, Greg? I want to share a comment from Calvin Trossel, and he has shared with us in chat, by letting hemp for fiber go to seed, there is potentially several extra weeks of maturity in the stock. Does this potentially diminish the fiber quality traits? Asked or heard? Let me know if you need me to repeat the question. His question is, does this potentially diminish the fiber quality traits?
Yes, it does. I do not know if it makes it any worse, but it definitely changes it. Because in letting it go to seed, then your male plants are all dead before the seed is matured. And when the male plants are dead, they start to decompose while they're standing there or fall apart. And so in our harvesting equipment for the dual crop, you have significantly more amounts of jam up in your equipment when doing it that way, because it's relatable to like a fishing pole. When you cast your line out there and you just get a bird's nest in your line when you did something wrong with casting it, whenever you have a male hemp fiber plant that has died and has started to rot in the field, any sort of baling operation or any sort of cutting that has a circular motion to it gets jammed up, and then you got to break out the blowtorch and watch out for all your different worms and bugs and stuff like that while you're getting in there to get it undone. So it's different. I don't know if it's worse. It causes more jam up in the equipment, but it has its better attributes too, because if we have the top of the plant cut off while it's still in the field standing up, we don't have to try to remove that in our factory if some of the leaves or some of the flower or some of the seeds are still inside of there when it arrives. So blessing and a curse.
He has shared some additional information. He is from Texas A&M Commerce, not Commerce, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And he has also shared, they've been doing trials, Greg and Tommy, and he has shared in comments that they were struggling to figure out the problems of greatly premature floral development as early as 17 days after planting with the BZ Polish variety and hemp fiber varieties. And then he had 3 Canadian varieties, and they began to flower, have flower development within 30 days of planting. Okay, so the remaining 2 entries in the trial, he is 33 degrees north of Lubbock. He says that they were expected with floral structural development occurring in the range of the 2 months. So his question is, the northern fiber varieties ranged from 16 to 36 inches tall. The stem mostly was covered with a floral structure. So it seems as though he's flowering and not getting the stock density that he's looking for. Is there any comments you'd like to share with Alvin Trossel with Texas A&M?
Yeah, so the real question is, what was the seed density that you planted at? The higher the seed density, the more competition it has to get for getting the plant up and going. So the higher the seed density, I've seen even up to 65 pounds an acre. The more plants you have, the taller it grows, because your planting time with your non-auto flowering, and I'm not an expert on this. I live on a farm, but I'm not a farmer that much. I can say that if you plant 60 days before you actually have your summer solstice, at summer solstice is when the plants actually start forming more towards the top than towards the bottom. So the longer the period of time that you can get it in the ground and growing before summer solstice, the better and more stalk you will have. I can also say that a frost can and will kill your hemp plant. And I can say that in planting, a large rain directly after can drown it. So your low-lying areas don't perform as well as your high-lying areas. The longer period of time that you can get it in the ground after frost ends, but before your summer solstice, the taller your plant will be and the higher your planting density. So at 50 pounds an acre, we get 1 million plants an acre.
Wonderful. As fate would have it, I have the lawn people outside, so I'm going to let Andrea take the questions and answers.
Hey, they're cutting the grass, right? So a couple of things. We do know that it's 6:30, and this has been a wealth of information, very valuable. I want to first thank Henry and Justin with U.S. Hemp Building Association for joining us with Texas Hemp Harvesters Association. And then also, Tommy, it is very nice to have you with us, and Greg as well. We thank you so much. We do know this won't be the last time, right, guys? And we do want to thank everyone for joining us. We will provide contact information. I know that Henry and Justin has shared how to be a part of their association, in addition to how to be a part of Texas Hemp Harvesters Association. I know that we have some amazing members with us, and if you haven't joined us, you can visit our website as well at TXHHA.org. Before we go, knowing that we're right on time, if anyone has any questions, if we can maybe hold on maybe 5 minutes, guys, we'll go ahead and let you raise your hand, and then we'll take you off of mute, and then you can ask them your question. So if that's okay, guys, can we take about 5 more minutes and see if we can capture some questions from our audience?
Yes,
So
and what I would love us to start with, okay, Dr. Arun, I see you. I know you have a question. I'd love to open this up from Jim. Jim made a comment about the binders, and so maybe Justin or Henry, if you guys would, I know we didn't show some of the slides about binders, but Jim says, I have access to land with natural clay near Brazos, and he's outside Katy. He's willing to consider using the land for production, basically for processing if it makes sense. And again, Jim, to just address you directly, we have to create the need for the market or identify the market need in order to make this work for Texas. And what we're showing you is where our products can come from, right? What we're capable of solving a need for in Texas. And so it's coming. So I'm going to open that up to Henry and Justin to answer about the binders and about processing plant outside Katy, Texas and near Prairie View. And then Dr. Runa will open you up for questions, okay?
It looks like you're talking, but you're muted. So is the question, I'm trying to find that question in the chat. Is it around capabilities out there?
Q&A. If you open Q&A, it's not in the chat. Yeah, it's in the question and answer.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do that here.
Okay, yeah, I see it. So natural clay, I mean, to my understanding, and Henry, jump in here if you have more educated in this, but I haven't seen natural clay used as the only binder in addition with the hemp. You need that chemical reaction between the lime and the water that's then being mixed with the hemp to make that material. So I'm not sure that the clay would be able to do it if that's what the question is. But certainly the land, I mean, that's the biggest bottleneck right now, is just getting that processing capabilities up with the right machinery, which is one of the biggest bottlenecks. But you know, when it comes to the actual ingredients, it's the hemp and then the lime and water, which is what makes that material.
Yeah, and I would say to the clay, I know that they have done binders and mixtures that incorporate clay, especially in Spain and in those regions as well. Being here in Texas, you know, I believe, and I'm not a scientific expert on this, but I think the clay play a big part in the pozzolan aspect of the formulation. And so with that being a part of the equation, and with the local hydrated lime that we have here as well, those formulations could probably most definitely be used here and sourced here in Texas. I know just outside of Austin, there's a company called Austin Lime Works that for the Hemp Architecture project, we actually did some mock-up walls using the local hydrated lime here from Austin, and then using a European source pozzolan. So I definitely see potential for creating a Texas-based pozzolan for those mixtures and figuring out how those formulas are performing.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and start with your question, Dr. Aruna. I believe Hannah has unmuted you. You can unmute Dr. Aruna.
I actually posted it to the chat box. I wanted to know if anyone tried root biomass in one of these products, because root has different chemical profiles, and I would like to know if anyone tried that.
What type of biomass? I didn't catch what type of biomass.
Root biomass. No one has, I think, looked at it. Now everyone talks about the shoot biomass, right?
Yeah.
How about the roots? It has very good, very strong root biomass too.
I haven't heard any uses of the root. That's an interesting thing, though. I certainly would want to read up on that. I've only seen the hemp stalk being used, but the root is certain. I mean, I haven't heard that, but that's really interesting.
So for us at Hempwood, the sheer volume of material that we have to use does not allow for a method of harvest that includes the root. Also, the non-uniformity that it throws in, because the roots are actually much more solid, and we have to break open the cell structure in order to be able to impregnate it with the adhesive in our process, where we're stealing the proteins from the soybean. The root does not allow that to happen on any sort of a scale. And so we have veered away from that by actually just cutting the root or cutting the stalk about 3 inches above the ground.
Thank you for sharing. All right, Dr. Aruna, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wonderful. And then Jim, I had seen that you had your hand up. Would you, if you'd still like to speak, go ahead and give me a little hand raise and I can allow you to talk if you want to ask another question. If not, we have taken up plenty of your time for this evening and we greatly appreciate, hold on, I think I've got one hand raised here. And we just greatly appreciate your time today. Okay, Dr. Aruna, you are, okay, I think your hand is still raised.
No. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just checking. All right, Jim said he's all good. Well, then we will conclude this webinar. Thank you so much. Again, this presentation, this recording, as well as the presentation are both going to be in the member resources section of txhha.org. So if you are a member, you have access to that. Of course, reach out to myself, Andrea Salas, if you have questions about the association in Texas. And then if you have questions about more hemp building specifics and requirements, reach out to Justin and Henry from USHBA. And again, you guys will be seeing more events like this coming out in the future. We do want to really get the construction industry in Texas going with some hemp.
And one last thing, Hannah, I want to make sure that, of course, we had Dr. Aruna with us this evening, but we'll also be doing a virtual open house at Prairie View University on November 11th. So please stay tuned. We're really excited for the university to share their findings.
Yes, absolutely. And then there is also a planned happy hour for those of you who are in Houston. We are working with Bayou City, who is a processing facility, but for CBD. So not construction related, not a decorticator, nothing like that, but they are one of our local Texas processing facilities that's going to be up and running, is up and running. And so we're going to have a little social hour, social distancing outside in the potluck or in the area, but I think that'll be a good time just to have some social gathering if you're comfortable with it. So. All right, with that, again, thank you all the panelists. We appreciate all the attendees for staying on. Have an excellent night. We appreciate you, and let's keep hemp going in Texas.
Good night, everyone.
Well, thanks for having us, and check us out at hempwood.com.
Yes, Hempwood, Hemptexture, you guys are awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Good to
you.
see everyone.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.